What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Six Pack News Cycle. I'm your host, Dylan Clemens, here with me, as always, my co-host, Michael Plant. What's up, fella? I'm excited to talk football with you, man. It's been a long time.
So excited you didn't even let me answer your question.
I know. I can't help it.
I'm doing well. I'm ready to talk some exciting, as exciting as you could get for not even in the free agency yet.
Yes, we're just post-combine, man. But there's some news that came up today. But before we get into it, I just want to remind you to please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube channel if you don't already. And head on over to fantasy6pack.net/plans and check out our memberships we got going on, especially if you're a fantasy baseball player. We got a ton of fantasy baseball content flowing over there. And we're there to help you with your drafts and anything else you got coming up. And our football content is flowing nonstop through the off season. So make sure you head on over there and check that out. But without further ado, let's just jump right into the big news of the day. And that was Derek Carr signing with the New Orleans Saints for 4 years, $150 million, 100 guaranteed. $100 million guaranteed for Derek Carr, Michael Plant. We're here to talk about this from a fantasy perspective. Do you like him moving forward with the Saints, or what's your opinion here?
Well, I mean, let's just give him a quick overview of what he did with the Raiders. I mean, he had 35,000 passing yards. Well, exactly 222 extra with that 35. 217 touchdowns. So, I mean, he is, somewhat fantasy relevant, but when we're talking about, 12 teamers, 10 teamers, it's really not going to be an improvement. This is really just a lateral movement for Derek Carr in a fantasy sense, and honestly, in a career sense, in my opinion. He's not really getting an upgrade outside of, maybe not even the receivers. I mean, you got Chris Olave now, but you had Devontae Adams that you got last.
And they were best friends.
I know, exactly. So I don't understand the movement with this, but maybe Derek Carr just kind of got pushed out of Las Vegas, and now he has a home where, they accept him. But fantasy-wise, he's QB2. I mean, as simple as it is. There's not much upside here. I mean, Michael Thomas is on the downslope of his career, so Chris Olave is
he's even going to be on the roster.
Exactly. You got Shaheed. I mean, you got the infamous Taysom Hill. He's not going to be QB1, so that's always a good thing. So, but I mean, it's really not much of an improvement for him. But I do like Olave moving forward a little bit more.
Sure.
It gives him a little bit more of an uptick.
Sure, but just to wrap up Derek Carr, the last 3 seasons he finished as QB18, QB18, and QB20. So that's really what his ceiling is, and kind of what you said. It's not necessarily an upgrade for him. We like to think that Josh McDaniels is a better offensive mind than Dennis Allen. You would think so anyways. It's like you said, it's just kind of blah for him from fantasy perspective. I do want to tell you, you were getting into Olave, so let's go there. He was wide receiver 27 last year in his rookie season. Do you think the quarterback upgrade helps him, or do you think he's going to stay the same? What are you thinking here?
It definitely gives him a bit of an uptick. I mean, let's be honest. Olave had Andy Dalton all year last year. And he got 119 targets. We love that. But those were Andy Dalton targets. I mean, kind of like 60-40 if they were a good target. We know Derek Carr has shown to hyper-target his number 1 guys in the past with Darren Waller. He did it last year with, Devontae. And I mean, like, I know you mentioned it a little bit before the show. We could touch on Rashid Shaheed, the deep threat here.
Yeah.
Who averages 14.4 yards of reception. Actually, that's a target. He averages 17.4 yards of reception. We know Derek Carr in his time with the Raiders. We had Mac Hollins. We had Nelson Aguilar got a contract off of Derek Carr throwing deep to him. So, it's not going to be Jarvis Landry. It's probably not going to be Michael Thomas running deep routes. So Rashid Shaheed, it's kind of a tongue twister, gets a little bit of an upgrade as well as, as if he can get more playing time, because he's going to be just kind of boomer bust with Derek Carr. But Olave, he's going to get more targets than 119, especially if he's the only guy. I expect him to be in like the 130 range next year, especially with him taking a step forward. I mean, there's a chance we could get more than 4 touchdowns from Chris Olave this year. I mean, we don't need a new DJ Moore. We don't need a new DJ Moore just getting 4 touchdowns every year.
Yeah. And what's awesome about this, Mike, Derek Carr walks right in and he's automatically the best quarterback in the NFC South.
Unfortunately so.
Like this move probably makes them favorites, right?
Yeah, but it's just because of their division.
Yeah, and it's March 6th. We still got a lot of off season to go. But I think that pretty much wraps up the Derek Carr talk. We don't need to speculate on how this affects Kamara yet. We don't even know what's going on with him with his suspension that could be looming, so we won't even really touch on that. But there was one more bit of news today. This was kind of expected the last week or so, but Tony Pollard will be franchise tagged by the Dallas Cowboys. I think he's going to be making around $10 million this year.
I think it was like 11, 12, somewhere around that area.
He finished as RB9 in a points per game basis last year, just over 15 points per game in PPR formats. Do you like him more this year, or do you think that finish last season was kind of his ceiling?
I mean, if Zeke stays around, which, I mean, everything is kind of indicating he's going to, he did hit his ceiling last year as a RB9 fantasy points per game. But let's be honest, it was only 3.2 points more than Zeke was averaging per game. Sure. So it's a product of this offense, which here's the glaring factor that I don't think most people are talking about, and they should be. It's the fact that Mike McCarthy will now be calling plays. It is no longer,
Kellen Moore.
Thank you, Kellen Moore. The guy should be a head coaching candidate. I don't know why he hasn't left, Mike McCarthy yet, but he was the reason the offense, ran so fluidly, at least, with all the injuries and whatnot they had last year. It's a great offensive coordinator. Now we got Mike McCarthy, old school, running this, offense. I think this is really what's going to take the take back on these RBs averaging 12.4 and 15.6 a game when they're on the field, because as well as I do, Mike McCarthy, back when he coached the Packers, they didn't really run the ball much, but they threw the ball a little bit more, which does benefit Tony Pollard because he is the pass catching back. Mm-hmm. But I mean, he only got 55 targets. That's not. I mean, we want Austin Eckler targets. We want 100 targets, not 55.
And it's not like Pollard's on the field a lot on third downs either, because they like Zeke as the pass protecting back there and stuff. So
he got 193 attempts this year, which is definitely a career best. It was only 38, 38 less than a Zeke had. Mm-hmm. But Zeke also was a little bit banged up, which, I mean, we could probably, account for a couple games lost here and there for Zeke. So, I mean, if Tony Pollard can get 200 attempts on the ground, bump those targets up to like 80, I mean, then we're talking about increasing that ceiling even more, because here's
or something.
Here's the big thing. Pollard scored as many touchdowns as Zeke did this year. 12 total for Pollard. 12 for Zeke because he didn't have a single receiving.
It's kind of wild to think about that, man, because we think of Zeke as a touchdown-dependent guy, which he is, but Tony Pollard's he's not a touchdown-dependent guy, but he did score.
He wasn't as touchdown-dependent.
Exactly. But are we going to see him score?
But he still is kind of, when you look at the baseline.
Yeah, is he going to get the opportunity to score 12 touchdowns again this year? That's what.
Because most of those touchdowns, I mean, we saw it were like 20 plus runs, 20 plus receptions. Like those are not easy to get.
Exactly.
But, I mean, he can do it, but I mean, I don't know if McCarthy calling the offense.
Agreed, man. His ceiling's definitely capped as long as he's in a committee with Zeke. And whether he's 1A or 1B, it doesn't really matter. But I think he'll still be a top 15 back-ish around once we get around draft season. So, but are you good, Mike? Or should we wrap this up?
That pretty much wraps it up. I know there's going to be a hell of a lot more news coming out in the next couple of days. 15th starts free agency, so
March 13th, the tampering period comes, so we might even have some news for you then. But I'm sure, Mike, it'll be a busy week for us next week, and we'll definitely be back with some more episodes of the Fantasy Six Pack News Cycle next week. But until then, for Mike, I'm Dylan. We'll talk to you guys next week.
See you later.